It sits in a plain glass jar next to the cinnamon in your kitchen cabinet, and it might be the single most expensive thing on that shelf. Gram for gram beating out silver. You have used it 100 times without thinking about it. Vanilla ice cream, vanilla candles, vanilla in your birthday cake, your coffee order, your perfume. But real vanilla, the kind that comes from an actual orchid pod, is one of the most labor-intensive crops on the planet. And almost none of it would exist today if not for a 12-year-old enslaved boy who solved a problem that had stumped European botanists for 300 years. This is the story of how a wild Mexican orchid became a Réunion Island secret, a Madagascar monopoly, and today a crop so valuable that farmers hire armed guards to sleep in their fields. Vanilla starts in the humid lowland forests of what is now eastern Mexico, home to the Totonac people long before Europeans arrived. Wild vanilla orchids grew there naturally, climbing trees in the jungle canopy, and the Totonac had figured out how to cure the pods into something fragrant and usable. They called the plant something that roughly translates to hidden flower because the orchid blooms for less than a day before wilting, tucked deep in dense foliage where it was easy to miss entirely. When the Aztecs conquered the Totonac in the 15th century, they took vanilla as tribute, and Aztec nobility began mixing it into a bitter chocolate drink to soften the flavor. Only royalty and warriors were allowed to drink it. Vanilla was luxury before Europe even knew it existed. When Hernán Cortés arrived in the 1520s, Spanish conquistadors encountered this chocolate vanilla drink at the court of Moctezuma and brought both ingredients back to Spain. For nearly a century, Spain kept the source of vanilla almost entirely secret, and Mexico held a total global monopoly on vanilla production, not because anyone was hoarding seeds, but because nobody outside Mexico could figure out how to grow it successfully. Here is the problem that would define vanilla's entire history for the next 300 years. The vanilla orchid's flower can only be pollinated by one specific species of bee, native exclusively to Mexico, along with a few hummingbirds that also happen to live only in that region. Europeans took vanilla cuttings to greenhouses across the continent, to colonies in Africa, to islands in the Indian Ocean. The plants grew, they flowered, and then nothing happened. No pods, no fruit, no vanilla. Without the right pollinator, the flowers simply wilted and died within hours, producing nothing at all. For 3 centuries, Mexico remained the only place on Earth capable of producing vanilla, and European growers were completely stumped as to why. By the 1800s, France had built a colonial foothold on Réunion Island, a small volcanic island in the Indian Ocean near Madagascar, then known as Bourbon Island. French planters imported vanilla vines from Mexico, hoping to break the monopoly and cultivate their own supply. The vines thrived in Réunion Island. Thousands of orchids bloomed across the island's plantations. And every single year, the harvest came back empty. No bees, no pods, no vanilla. It was maddening. The plants were healthy and beautiful and completely useless, and nobody could explain why the flowers refused to fruit outside their native Mexican soil. In 1841, on a plantation on Réunion Island, a 12-year-old enslaved boy named Edmond changed all of that. Edmond had been born into slavery on the plantation and worked under his owner, a man named Ferréol Bellier-Beaumont, who had taken an interest in botany and had been experimenting with the vanilla vines himself without success. Edmond had spent time watching the orchids closely, and using a thin sliver of bamboo or a similar tool, he discovered he could manually lift the flap of tissue separating the male and female parts of the flower, called the rostellum, and press the two together with his thumb to pollinate it by hand. It took him only a few seconds per flower. Bellier-Beaumont tested the technique, and it worked. flower Edmond had pollinated produced a full, healthy vanilla pod. A 12-year-old, enslaved, uneducated in any formal botanical sense, had solved a problem that had defeated professional European scientists for 300 years, using nothing but a sliver of bamboo and a steady hand. The technique spread rapidly across Réunion's plantations. Within a decade, hand pollination had become the standard method used everywhere vanilla was grown, outside Mexico. And it remains the exact same technique used today, essentially unchanged, on vanilla farms across the world. Every single vanilla pod that is not grown in Mexico, meaning the overwhelming majority of vanilla produced on Earth today, exists because of a method invented by an enslaved child. Slavery was abolished on Réunion Island in 1848, and Edmond was freed, along with the rest of the island's enslaved population. He took the surname Albius. But freedom did not bring him fortune. Despite having handed the colonial vanilla industry the exact technique it needed to make millions, Edmond Albius died in poverty in 1880. And for decades afterward, credit for his discovery was disputed or given to the French botanists who had merely popularized what he had already figured out. With hand pollination solved, vanilla cultivation exploded across the Indian Ocean region. French colonial administrators pushed the crop hard on Réunion and on neighboring Madagascar, which had the climate, the land, and, through French colonial control, the labor to make vanilla production viable at scale. By the early 20th century, Madagascar had overtaken Réunion as the dominant vanilla producer in the French colonial system, and it has held that position on and off for more than a century since. The labor required is staggering, and it has barely changed since Edmond's time. Each individual flower on a vanilla vine blooms for only a matter of hours, once a year, and must be hand-pollinated in that narrow window, or the entire pod is lost. A single skilled worker can pollinate a few hundred flowers a day if they move quickly and know exactly what they are doing. Multiply that across an entire plantation, across an entire growing season, and the sheer number of individual human hand movements required to produce a year's global vanilla supply becomes almost impossible to picture. Every single vanilla pod on Earth outside Mexico has been touched individually by a human thumb. And the labor does not stop at pollination. After the flowers are pollinated, the pods take about 9 months to mature on the vine, roughly the length of a human pregnancy, and once harvested, they still are not usable. Green vanilla pods have almost no scent or flavor at all. They must go through a curing process that can take several months, involving a sequence of blanching the pods in hot water, sweating them wrapped in cloth or blankets to trigger enzymatic reactions, drying them slowly in the sun over weeks, and then conditioning them in sealed boxes for months longer while their flavor compounds fully develop. From flower to finished, sellable bean, the process takes close to a full year of continuous labor and waiting. This is why real vanilla has always been expensive, and it is why it can never be produced quickly, no matter how much demand spikes. That combination, extreme labor intensity paired with an unavoidable production timeline, is the reason vanilla prices behave more like a volatile commodity than a spice. When global demand rises faster than farmers can plant and mature new vines, which themselves take 2 to 3 years before producing their first flowers, prices spike violently. In 2017, following a devastating cyclone that tore through Madagascar's vanilla-growing regions and destroyed a significant portion of that year's crop, vanilla prices surged to levels that at times rivaled the price of silver by weight, turning a spice cabinet staple into one of the most valuable agricultural commodities on the planet, pound for pound. That kind of price spike changes behavior on the ground in ways that sound almost fictional. In the vanilla-growing regions of northeastern Madagascar, particularly around the Sava region, vanilla theft became a serious criminal enterprise almost overnight. Farmers who had spent months tending their vines and curing their harvest would wake up to find entire sections of crops stripped bare, overnight by thieves who could sell stolen green pods on the black market for enough money to change their lives. In response, farmers began harvesting their vanilla earlier than ideal, sometimes weeks before the pods were fully mature, simply to get them off the vine before thieves could take them. Even though early harvesting produces a noticeably lower quality bean, communities organized armed night patrols. Some farmers began carving personal identification marks directly into the skin of individual growing pods while still on the vine, an improvised anti-theft branding system so that stolen vanilla could theoretically be traced back to its rightful owner if recovered. Vigilante justice against suspected vanilla thieves has, in some documented cases, turned violent and even fatal, a level of tension almost unimaginable for something most people think of as a mild baking flavor. The economics of the industry compound the pressure. Madagascar accounts for a dominant share of the world's natural vanilla supply, and the vast majority of that production comes from smallholder farmers working tiny plots of land, not large industrial operations. These farmers are often at the mercy of a long, opaque supply chain of local collectors, exporters, and international buyers. And historically, only a small fraction of the final retail price of a vanilla product has made its way back to the farmers who spent a year of labor producing the raw bean. When prices crash, which they periodically do just as violently as they spike, entire farming communities that had come to depend on vanilla income are left with vines they cannot afford to maintain and no buyers willing to pay enough to make the labor worthwhile. Meanwhile, the vast majority of what the world actually consumes as vanilla flavor has nothing to do with any of this. The overwhelming majority of vanilla flavoring used in food and consumer products worldwide is not natural vanilla at all, but a synthetic compound called vanillin, chemically identical in its primary flavor compound, but produced industrially, historically from wood pulp byproducts, and increasingly today from petrochemical sources, or from genetically engineered microorganisms. It is dramatically cheaper to produce, immune to weather and crop failure, and indistinguishable to most consumers in a mass-produced cookie or candle. Natural vanilla extract, the kind made from actual cured orchid pods, represents only a small sliver of total global vanilla flavor consumption, even though it is the version most people picture when they think of the word. This creates an odd tension at the center of the entire industry. The premium market for genuine, natural vanilla, the kind favored by high-end food brands and consumers willing to pay for it, depends entirely on smallholder farmers in places like Madagascar, continuing to endure a labor-intensive, climate-vulnerable, economically volatile crop cycle that has changed almost nothing since a 12-year-old boy figured out how to do it by hand in 1841. Every time a company markets a product as made with real vanilla rather than artificial flavor, it is quietly relying on that same unbroken chain of individual, human, hand-pollinated labor, stretching back nearly 2 centuries. There have been efforts to modernize or stabilize the industry. Some certification and direct trade programs have attempted to guarantee farmers a fairer, more stable price and cut out layers of the traditional supply chain, aiming to reduce the boom and bust cycle that leaves farming communities vulnerable to both theft and price collapse in alternating years. Researchers have also experimented for years with lab-grown vanilla, using plant cell cultures or fermentation processes to produce natural vanillin without needing an orchid, a farm, or a single hand-pollinated flower at all. So far, none of these alternatives have managed to fully replace the demand for true, vine-grown, hand-cured vanilla. partly because of flavor complexity that synthetic and lab-grown versions still struggle to fully replicate, and partly because a segment of consumers and food producers specifically want the traceable, artisanal story that comes with a bean grown on an actual vine. That story starts with Edmond Albius, a boy with no formal education, no financial stake in the outcome, and no ownership even of his own labor, discovering with a piece of bamboo and a careful thumb the single technique that would define an entire global industry for the next 2 centuries. He never profited from it. He died poor and largely uncredited, decades after making the discovery that would eventually turn vanilla into one of the most expensive spices on Earth. Today, in the same region of the world where his discovery first took root, farmers sleep beside their crops with weapons, carve identifying marks into individual pods, and gamble their entire year's income on weather patterns and a market that can swing wildly overnight, all in service of a flavor most people pour into a bowl of ice cream without a second thought. The next time you see the words real vanilla or natural vanilla flavor on a label, there is a real chance that somewhere behind that ingredient is a farmer in Madagascar who pollinated that exact flower by hand, using a technique invented not by a scientist in a laboratory, but by an enslaved 12-year-old on a French colonial island, working with nothing more than a sliver of bamboo and enough patience to succeed where professional botanists had failed for 300 years. If this story surprised you, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Drop a comment and tell us what everyday ingredient you want us to dig into next.